My name is Victoria. I once thought that love and marriage were a union of two people against the whole world. I was wrong. A third person entered my life. Not a mistress. Not a friend. A mother-in-law. At first, it was little comments, friendly advice, and smiles that hid poison. Then came the rumors that I lived off my husband. All while the expenses for our home fell entirely on my shoulders. You know what's the scariest part? Not that a stranger invades your life, but that the person you love doesn't take your side. Today I'll tell you how, over one holiday dinner, our family collapsed. And how I realized, sometimes, to regain your freedom, you have to leave even the one you love. Subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments. What would you do in my place? I want to read every answer. Let's begin. I used to think I knew exactly what marriage was supposed to look like. Two people, side by side, building a life together, supporting each other no matter what. That's what I believed. Right up until I met Grayson's mother. But let me start at the beginning. My name is Victoria Lorne. I'm 32, and I work as an interior designer. I'd always lived in the city, coffee shops on every corner, the hum of traffic outside my window, and neighbors who barely knew each other's names. That was my normal. That was my comfort zone. I met Grayson at a charity art event in Boston. I was there to help stage the venue, arranging furniture, lighting, little decorative touches. He was there with a colleague, looking slightly out of place among the abstract paintings and sculptures. I remember noticing him because he didn't seem interested in the art at all. He was focused on the people, watching them the way someone might study a puzzle they were trying to solve. We ended up talking over a tray of miniature quiches, of all things. He had a quiet confidence, a way of listening that made you feel like your words actually mattered. By the end of the night, he'd asked for my number. By the end of the week, we'd had our first date. Grayson worked in software development, the kind of job that didn't tie him to a specific location. I liked that about him. I liked that we could, theoretically, live anywhere. It made me feel free. 6 months later, on a windy afternoon at the harbor, he proposed. It wasn't a big public scene, just the two of us, the smell of salt in the air, and a small velvet box he pulled from his jacket. I said yes without hesitation. That's when he suggested we move to his hometown, a small coastal place in Maine called Ashford Bay. He said it would be quieter, safer, a better place to build our life together. I'd never even heard of it, but the way he described it, quiet streets, friendly neighbors, ocean views, it sounded like something out of a magazine. So I agreed. We arrived in Ashford Bay on a crisp September morning. The streets were lined with trees just starting to turn gold, and the air smelled faintly of wood smoke. Our new house was a white two-story with blue shutters, sitting on a street where everyone seemed to know everyone else. We'd barely begun carrying boxes inside when there was a firm, confident knock at the door. Grayson opened it without hesitation, and that's when I saw her for the first time. Serena Lorne was the kind of woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Not a hair out of place, her cream sweater perfectly paired with pearl earrings. She smiled when she saw me, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Victoria, right?" she said, her tone light but with an undertone I couldn't place. "Welcome to the family." Before I could respond, she stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over the boxes stacked in the hallway. "Oh, you've put the sofa here? Interesting choice. And the coffee maker, over there? Grayson usually prefers it on the right side of the stove." She said it like an observation, but it felt like an instruction. I told myself it was just her way of helping. After all, she was his mother. Maybe she was just excited. We sat down for tea at the kitchen counter, still surrounded by unpacked boxes. Serena told story after story about Grayson's childhood. How he was always the most responsible kid in his class. How he won his high school science fair. How he never made an important decision without asking for her advice first. It all sounded affectionate, but there was a subtle undercurrent in her words. Something that said, "I know him better than anyone ever will." When she finally left, Grayson just smiled and said, "Don't worry, she's just like that. You'll get used to it." I nodded, but deep down, I felt something tighten in my chest. Over the next few days, we settled into the house. I unpacked the kitchen, arranging things in a way that made sense to me. One afternoon, while I was out picking up groceries, I came home to find Serena in our kitchen again, uninvited, moving the coffee maker to the right side of the stove, just as she'd mentioned. "Oh, hi," she said cheerfully when she saw me. "I thought I'd help you get things set up the way Grayson likes them." It was a small thing, but it felt invasive. This was supposed to be our home, not an extension of hers. That night, I told Grayson about it. He laughed it off. "She's just trying to make things easier for you. That's her way. I didn't argue. But in the back of my mind, I started to wonder whose home this really was, ours or hers by proxy. On Saturday morning, there was another knock at the door. Serena again, this time with a basket of pastries from the local bakery. I thought you might like to know where to get the best ones, she said with a smile. She stayed for an hour, rearranging the throw pillows in the living room, and making little comments about the curtains I'd chosen. You might want something lighter. These make the room feel smaller, she remarked, as if we were in a design consultation. When she left, the house felt different. Not messy, not invaded exactly, but altered, like someone had shifted the balance. That night, as I lay in bed next to Grayson, listening to the quiet hum of the ocean through the open window, I told myself it was nothing, just an adjustment period. But there was a small voice inside me that whispered, this isn't the last time she's going to walk through that door without knocking. And that voice, I would soon learn, was right. The first week in Ashford Bay felt like a soft launch into a new life. Salt in the air, a narrow main street with hanging flower baskets, and neighbors who waved even if they didn't know your name yet. I tried to tell myself that Serena's eagerness was a phase, that once we were settled, the boundaries would draw themselves. Boundaries, I've learned since, don't draw themselves. People either respect them or they don't. On Tuesday morning, I found a sticky note on the fridge in looping cursive. Left the coffee filters in the second drawer. Much easier to reach. S. I stared at the note, then opened the drawer, then the next. She'd reorganized the entire coffee station, filters, beans, mugs, even the kettle. The cabinet where I kept spices had been alphabetized. At some point, while I was out meeting a client about window treatments, Serena had let herself in and decided our kitchen needed her system. When Grayson came home, I held up the note. Did you give your mom a key? He hesitated. A tiny pause, but I felt it. She asked for one. In case of emergencies. In case of emergencies, I repeated. Like misplaced cinnamon? Vic, he said, palms up in that gentle diplomatic way he had. It's not a big deal. She just wants to help. She wants control. I said before I could stop myself. His mouth opened, closed. She's adjusting too. We moved closer to her. It's a change. Closer, I said, folding the note in half. We moved into range. He kissed my forehead, the way you'd quiet a small dog that started barking at the mailman. I'll talk to her. He didn't. Thursday, Serena brought a basket of groceries. She explained each item as if she were training me for a role. This brand of milk because other brands upset Grayson's stomach. This bread because he liked the crust thinner. This brand of coffee because anything darker made him too jittery to think straight. I frowned at the list in her hand, the list she said she'd kept since his college days. A grocery ledger for her adult son. The image was ridiculous and somehow a little frightening. Thank you, I said, and meant it for the gesture, not the lesson. She smiled back. It was always a beautiful smile. You'll see, routines make life simpler. Especially for men. I design systems for a living, I said lightly. I promise I can handle the coffee beans. She tilted her head, like a bird listening for worms under the soil. Of course. It's just, Grayson thrives with structure. It would be a shame to change what works. What works for whom? I didn't ask. She patted around the kitchen like a cat, brushing surfaces with her fingertips, moving a bowl half an inch so it aligned with the edge of the island. When she left, there was a new candle on the counter I hadn't bought. It smelled like white florals and submission. Saturday, she arrived with pastry again. I'd just finished arranging the living room. Not perfectly, just enough to feel like us. A slightly oversized rug, a long low sofa, two mismatched chairs I loved because they refused to match anything else. Serena went quiet when she saw the chairs. These are interesting, she said. Very bold. I like them, I said. She hummed, a neutral sound that wasn't neutral at all, then began to lightly tug on the curtain panels. These fight the window. Something lighter might make the room feel less heavy. It feels warm to me, I said. Like a space you want to sit in. For evening perhaps, she mused. During the day, though, one must consider light. She stepped back, surveying the room with the authoritative air of someone whose opinion always ended conversations. Grayson used to prefer softer palettes. Neutrals. He has me now, I said, smiling as if I'd made a joke, though I meant it. Something flashed in her eyes. Not anger exactly, but the mental flick of a ruler wrapping knuckles. She placed the box of pastries on the coffee table and set out plates unasked, as if demonstrating a correct way to inhabit the room. When she left, I found the candle lit. By the second week, people in town knew my name. They knew I did interiors and that I'd left the city for love. Or that's how Ruth at the cafe put it with a wink. It was nice for a while. The baker remembered I liked the seeded loaf. Alice waved each morning as she marched her dog down the block, and the hardware store owner called me kiddo, in that Maine way that manages to be both condescending and fatherly. Then came the first pebble that would become an avalanche. At the cafe, I was waiting for my latte when two women I'd seen around. One in a forest green coat, the other with a bob so sharp it might have cut bread. Started talking just behind me, not whispering enough to be discreet. Such a pretty girl, Green Coat said. From the city, Bob said. Must be nice, Green Coat continued. Not to work. Just settle in and decorate. Bob's voice lowered exactly 1 decibel. Well, not everyone needs to work. Not when your husband is comfortable. They glanced at me. Just a little. A stealthy, sideways glance. Ruth slid my latte across as if it were a shield. Her mouth was a tight line. People assume things, Ruth said quietly after the women left. It's a small town. Rumors travel faster than gulls on a windy day. Assume what? I asked, already knowing. That you don't work, she said, apologetic, as if she'd delivered the rumor herself. That Grayson provides. People see him. They know the family. She paused, chose her words with care. Serena is connected. Connected. A word that means both plugged in and entangled. I do work, I said. I pay for things. Many things. Ruth nodded. I know. I just wanted you to know what you're up against. I took my latte and walked home with the deliberate calm of a person who won't run from a house that might be on fire. That night, as we ate pasta by the window, I told Grayson what I'd heard. He twirled spaghetti around his fork, shoulders tensing and then relaxing. Babe, small towns talk, he said. It'll pass. It started somewhere, I said. Things don't pass if they're constantly being poured. You think my mom? I think your mom repeats a narrative in which you are the noble provider and I am the lucky recipient, I said. It's very flattering for you. That's not fair. Neither is a stranger organizing my spice cabinet while I'm out. He set down his fork. I'll talk to her. He didn't. But he texted her, I think. Or she sensed the shift. Because the next time she came over, she knocked. Once. Then let herself in anyway. She arrived at noon with a casserole. There are entire histories buried under casseroles in this country. She set it in the oven like a clam steak and then fetched a folder from her tote. A folder, I swear to you, labeled meal plans. I made some suggestions, she said, laying out a weekly grid. Grayson needs protein midday, or he gets headaches. He does best with lighter dinners. Here are recipes that have worked. Worked, I repeated, something breaking and resetting in my smile. She tapped the grid. I also listed household tasks, nothing heavy, just a rhythm. Monday linens, Tuesday floors, Wednesday. I slid the paper back to her gently, like returning a baby someone had placed in my arms without asking. We'll make our own rhythm, Serena. Her eyes flicked up. Not surprised. Not offended. Filed. Of course, she said, folding the page with surgical precision. I sometimes forget not everyone appreciates structure. It's just, Grayson thrives with it. So do I said. When it's ours. We stood in the quiet. The oven hummed. She smiled again. And I watched her decide to pivot. Tell me about your work, she said. The decorating. Design, I said not unkindly. I handle spatial planning, materials, light, how a space functions and feels. Her smile warmed 2 degrees. Sounds lovely. And not too demanding, I hope. So you can devote time to the house. It's demanding, I said, holding her gaze. And I devote time where it matters. A small, near imperceptible nod. Score recorded. The door became the war front. Serena knocked now, but only once. The perfunctory courtesy of a formality she didn't believe in. I started keeping the deadbolt turned. If I was home, I could open it. If I wasn't, she could not. A boundary you could hear. One afternoon, I returned from a client consult and saw a vase of white roses in the living room. Roses I hadn't bought. The door had been locked. I checked the back. The kitchen window latch was not seated properly. I stared at it for a long minute. Then at the roses, then at the card. To brighten the room. S. At dinner, Grayson said. Maybe she left them while I was home? I might have not noticed. Did you? He hesitated again. That half-second. I realized then that Serena hadn't needed to learn to pick a lock. She'd needed to teach her son to leave one. 2 days later, a neighbor named Carol cornered me outside the hardware store. She had that most dangerous of expressions, Concern disguised as kindness. Victoria, dear, she said, lowering her voice as if preparing me for bad news. Some folks are saying you've taken on a lot, moving here. It's a lot to manage. A house, a marriage, settling in. It's good that Grayson's well, that he's so steady. Not every man. I pay for the house, I said before I could stop myself. Or most of it. She blinked. The script had not prepared her for improvisation. Oh, I didn't mean, it's just Serena said. She stopped, cheeks flushing. I mean, Serena didn't say, she just, you know how she talks about her son. Yes, I said. I do. Carol retreated with the speed of someone who'd stepped on a cat's tail. That evening, the conversation with Grayson began carefully and ended badly. I need you to ask your mother not to come in when we're not home, I said. And not to move things. And not to hand out narratives about who does what in our marriage. She's not handing out narratives, he said. You're reading into things. I design spaces for a living, I said. I read what's there and what's implied. He rubbed his forehead. Vic, I'm stuck in the middle here. Then get unstuck. I said too quickly. You're not a child. Silence. His jaw tightened. I'll talk to her. When? Soon. Soon is a foggy word. That's unfair. What's fair, I said, is a key. He glanced at the bowl by the door where his mother's key lay next to ours. A third slice of metal with the same authority. He stood, walked over, picked it up, and turned it in his palm. I'll get it back, he said. When? He slid the key into his pocket. Tomorrow. I believed him because I wanted to. Belief is a design choice too. You pick a color you can live with. The next morning, Serena arrived with a casserole dish in one hand, and a set of linen napkins in the other. She knocked. She waited. I opened the door. Lovely, she said, gliding past me. You remembered. I always remember, I said. She placed the napkins on the counter. These are from my mother. Family pieces elevate a table. You'll see. We danced our usual dance, her placing things, me unplacing them after she left. But when she moved toward the bowl by the door, her hand paused. The key was gone. She registered it. She didn't comment. She smiled instead, too brightly, and kissed my cheek on her way out. Later, my phone pinged. A message from a number I didn't recognize, but instantly knew. A woman should never bar a mother from her son's home. It creates strain. I typed, deleted. Typed again, deleted again. Finally I wrote. A woman should be invited. I didn't send it. Some replies are born to make things worse. By the end of the second week, I was tired in a way that sleep couldn't touch. The town was beautiful, the street quiet, the ocean persistent. And yet, my shoulders lived up by my ears. I bought flowers for myself. Not white roses, sunflowers, absurdly large, grinning in their own faces. I set them on the table and breathed. That afternoon, Ruth slid a small envelope across the cafe counter. This was left for you, she said. Inside was a note on creamy stationery. Sunday dinner, our place. Family only. 5 p.m. Below smaller. Do bring your spreadsheets. We can compare contributions. I laughed. It burst out of me, sharp and humorless. Serena, who believed polite warfare to be the only warfare worth fighting, had just declared one. The words were measured, the gauntlet velvet. But it was a gauntlet all the same. When I looked up, Ruth's face was sympathetic. You okay? I'm deciding where to put the furniture, I said. In the house, she asked. In my head, I said. On Sunday I would go. I would smile. I would not bring spreadsheets. Not yet. Numbers were facts, yes. But timing was architecture. I walked home slowly, the afternoon light puddling gold on the sidewalk, the ocean reminding me that everything constant also erodes. At the door, I paused with my hand on the knob and thought of boundaries again. How a line is only a line if both sides agree it's there. Inside, the sunflowers were still smiling. I moved them 3 inches to the left, then back, then laughed at myself. I turned the deadbolt. I turned on the lamp. I waited for Grayson. And for whatever we would be after Sunday. Because I knew this much now. Serena wasn't just visiting. She was testing the foundation. And hairline cracks, left unattended, learned to widen. I told myself it was just dinner. A meal, a few hours, polite conversation. I've designed enough spaces to know. Sometimes you walk into a room expecting warmth and find it's been arranged for performance. Serena's house was one of those New England classics. White clapboard, navy shutters, a wraparound porch with a swing that never creaked. Inside it was all pale rugs, coastal paintings, and the faint scent of something lemony and expensive. Grayson called it homey. I called it staged. She greeted us with a hug for him and a careful kiss on my cheek, then ushered us into the dining room. The table was already set. Linen napkins, the same ones she'd brought to our place, crystal water glasses, and a silver candelabra flickering like a set piece. My place card. Yes, there were place cards. Read Victoria guest. Grayson's read Grayson's son. I took my seat. The first course was a chilled soup in delicate china bowls. Serena asked Grayson about work, about his latest project, about whether the drive from our place felt long in the mornings. Every answer was met with a nod. See, that's why structure matters. Or I told you that commute would be fine. It was like watching a duet where I didn't know the song. When she finally turned to me, her smile was sweet as sugar glass. And how are you finding the housework? I blinked. Housework? Yes, keeping up with everything. It must be a lot on top of, she waved a hand vaguely. You're decorating. It's design, I said. And the housework is fine. We both do our share. She tilted her head. Grayson was always so busy. In college, he barely had time to. We manage, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Her eyes flickered, cataloging the tone for later. Of course. I just mean I know how much he thrives with a steady environment. The second course arrived. Baked fish with lemon and herbs. Halfway through, Serena set down her fork and said, I was telling Carol from the hardware store how lucky Grayson is to have someone looking after him. She agreed. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. Looking after him? Yes. Making a home, keeping things running. Not every woman understands the importance of. I pay most of the mortgage, I said, not loudly but loud enough. Silence. Grayson's fork paused midair. Serena's smile didn't waver, but it was the kind of smile that could slice paper. Oh, I didn't mean financially. I meant the nurturing. I met her eyes. I'm sure Carol understood you meant more than that. The air in the room shifted. That subtle drop in temperature when politeness becomes thin ice. Dessert was berry tart, but the sweetness didn't stick. Serena began reminiscing about Grayson's childhood, each anecdote ending with some reference to how he liked things a certain way, or how change was always hard for him. The stories were less about nostalgia and more about shaping a narrative, one where I was a recent, disruptive variable. Grayson laughed along, but less with each story. When she told one about how he'd refused to eat anything but white bread for a month, he glanced at me, then back at his plate. Finally, she said, Of course, marriage is about compromise. You'll learn each other's rhythms, won't you? We already have rhythms, I said. Her gaze softened just enough to be condescending. Some take longer to settle. After dinner, while Grayson helped her clear plates, I wandered into the living room. A family photo sat on the mantel. Serena, her late husband, and Grayson at maybe 22. They were all smiling, but there was something in Serena's posture, one hand on Grayson's shoulder, fingers curved like a clasp. I heard their voices in the kitchen. Serena's was low but clear. She needs to understand how things work here. Grayson's reply was muffled, but I caught the words, she's trying. Trying, Serena said, as if it were a synonym for failing. When they returned, her expression was the same polished smile as before. But I'd heard enough. We left just after 8. In the car, the silence was thicker than the fog rolling in off the bay. She's not going to change, I said finally. She's my mom, he said. That's not an answer. He gripped the wheel. You went in ready to fight. I went in ready to eat dinner. She's old-fashioned. She doesn't mean harm. She's building a story where I'm the side character, I said. And she's telling it to everyone. He didn't answer. The wipers beat a slow rhythm on the windshield. That night, I lay awake, replaying every glance, every phrase. I thought about the place card, guest. And I realized that's how she saw me. A visitor in her son's life. Temporary. If Serena was staging a performance, I'd just been given my role. The question was whether I'd play it, or rewrite the script. The Monday after Serena's Sunday dinner felt like the first day after a storm that hadn't actually passed. The sky over Ashford Bay was a hard, clean blue. The kind that makes you squint, and the gulls were louder than usual, squabbling over nothing. I made coffee without thinking, stood at the counter with the mug warming my hands, and stared at the vase of sunflowers I'd moved 2 inches left, then right, then left again. I'd designed enough rooms to know when something was off. I kept living in a house where something was off. By noon I'd stopped pretending this was about curtain panels and coffee makers. I opened my laptop. Banking portals aren't romantic, just clean fonts and rows of numbers. But sometimes numbers are the only language that doesn't lie. I pulled up the mortgage account first, then our joint checking, then my personal account. I sorted by date, then by amount. I printed the last 12 months and spread the pages across the dining table like a map. Patterns appeared immediately. Mortgage, my account. Utilities, mostly mine. Insurance, mine. Groceries, mine more often than not. I knew this already in the loose way you know where your keys are without looking. Seeing it in black and white felt different. It felt like being measured. I made a spreadsheet. Columns, date, vendor, category, amount paid from. Totals at the bottom. Subtotals by month. I color-coded the lines paid from my account red, not because I was angry, though I was, but because red is the color you use when you need someone to actually see. Halfway through, something else tugged at my attention. There, in Grayson's personal account history, regular transfers, same day each month, same memo line, Serena Lorne Consulting. I sat back, the chair creaking in a way it never had with anyone else in this house. Consulting? I Googled it. An old article in the Ashford Bay Chronicle from 3 years ago. Local mother launches family finance coaching. A headshot of Serena in a navy blazer, the kind of smile that makes you think you've made a good decision just by clicking. A website still live but unloved. Last post dated 18 months ago. The book now button returned a page not found. Back to the portal. The sums were not symbolic. These weren't help with utilities transfers. They were rent-sized. Mortgage-sized. Life-sized. The oven clicked in the silence as the metal cooled. A smell of coffee and paper ink filled the room. Somewhere outside a dog barked twice, and then thought better of it. I added a new tab to the spreadsheet. Transfers to SLC. I entered every line for a year. Totals again. Then I did what designers do when they have to present to clients who don't hear words. I made a simple chart. Bars of red, bars of gray. The colors made their point. When Grayson came home, the table was an exhibit. He paused in the doorway the way people pause when they don't know if they're stepping into an argument or an installation. Hey. Hey, I said without looking up. I finished typing a date, hit return, and slid the laptop aside. We need to go through this. He dropped his keys in the bowl, glanced automatically at the spot where his mother's key used to lie, then back to the table. What is all this? Facts, I said. 12 months of them. He approached slowly. I didn't push the papers at him. I didn't want to make this adversarial more than it already was. I just watched his eyes move down the columns. The furrow between his brows appeared at line 7. It deepened by line 20. When he reached the chart, he sat. Vic. Say it out loud. I said because sometimes people need their own voices to convince them. What do you see? He swallowed. You paid most of it. Most, I repeated because the word was accurate and insufficient. And your transfers to your mother? He flinched like I'd said the quiet part too loud. Her business she needed. Needed what? I asked softly. Because if it's capital, she should have investors and a plan. If it's help, we should have a budget for help. If it's obligation, then say that. Say the word that's actually true. He stared at the paper long enough that I almost reached for his hand. She said it was temporary. How long has temporary been happening? I asked. He didn't answer. I stood and walked to the sink, turned the tap on and then off without filling anything. I'm not angry that you love your mother, I said. I'm angry that you outsource our marriage to her. I'm angry that she narrates a version of our life to this town where you are the provider, and I am the beneficiary, and you don't correct it. I'm angry that my work gets called decorating, while your mother runs a consulting firm that doesn't consult. Mostly I'm tired. He rubbed his eyes the way people do when sleep won't fix what's wrong. What do you want me to do? 2 things, I said. First, be honest about the money. With me. With yourself. With her. Second, stop letting other people define who we are. He nodded, slow and brittle. I'll talk to her. When? The word was a string stretched tight between us. Tomorrow, he said. He meant it. I could hear the decision hardening in his voice like drying plaster. I'll go after work. Okay, I said, because the next thing after a decision is a test. We ate standing up, leftover pasta that had lost its gloss. He went to bed before me. I waited in the kitchen until the dishwasher clicked into its long, low hum. Then I printed everything, every sheet, every chart, and slid the pages into a black folder, the kind with a spine you can label. I wrote household 12 months and dated it. I put the folder in the drawer with the takeout menus. It felt appropriate somehow. The next day, I worked from the breakfast nook where the light is best. I drafted a living room plan for a client with a newborn, blocking out the traffic flow between a sectional and a bassinet. Everything has to be reachable, she'd said. But nothing can be trip-able. I understood her in more ways than she knew. At lunch, I walked to the cafe. Ruth poured my usual without asking. Rough few days, she asked. I've had better, I said, and because she was Ruth I added. I did the math. She whistled softly. Math is meaner than gossip. At least math doesn't pretend it's for your own good, I said. She slid over a slice of lemon pound cake, as if it were a prescription. On the house. For calcium. Or courage. On my way out, Carol from the hardware store intercepted me like a well-meaning traffic cone. Dear, are you coming to the church sale this weekend? Serena's organizing it. She always gets such a turnout. I have work, I said. Of course, she said quickly, then leaned in, lowering her voice to a stage whisper Ashford Bay probably taught in kindergarten. Serena said you were so busy settling in, bless you. It's such a lot, running a home. She said Grayson is carrying things while you get your feet under you. I blinked slowly, the way you do when you don't trust the first words that want to leap out of your mouth. You know what's funny? I said. People here talk about homes like they're one-person projects. Carol's palms fluttered. Well, I didn't mean. Of course you didn't, I said, and smiled the way Serena smiles, polite enough to be confusing. When I stepped back onto Main Street, the air felt sharper. I texted Grayson. How'd it go? He replied an hour later, going now. I didn't text back. Waiting is an art. So is not checking the clock. He returned after dusk. He set his keys in the bowl carefully, as if loudness might break something else. He looked older by a day. How was it? I asked. He drew a breath that said he was still somewhere between her kitchen and our doorway. She cried, he said. Then she was angry. Then she said I was choosing you over her. What did you say? That I was choosing us, he said. He swallowed. She asked if us meant she gets less. Does she? I asked. He looked at me like he wanted me to say no. I didn't. She will, I said. Because we will. He nodded, then laughed without humor. She said the transfers were none of your business. They aren't, I said. They're ours. He rubbed the back of his neck. She invited us to Thanksgiving, he said. Big thing. Family. Neighbors. The pastor. She said it would be good for appearances. He winced at his own word choice. For community. Community, I repeated, tasting the way it sometimes means audience. Are we going? He hesitated. If we don't, she'll make it a story. If we do, she'll make it a stage. Then we choose our story, I said. I walked to the drawer, slid out the black folder, and put it on the table. If she wants an audience, she can have the truth. He stared at the folder like it might bite. Vic, I'm done letting her perform a fiction that costs me my name, I said. I'm not going to shout. I'm not going to accuse. I'm going to show numbers. Numbers aren't insults. He pressed his fingers to his temples. She'll say you humiliated her. She's already humiliated me, I said, and my voice didn't rise, which surprised us both. Every time she told this town a story where I don't exist as an adult. Every time she rearranged my home like a showroom. Every time she made a ritual out of me being a guest. I tapped the folder. I'm inviting myself to the role I actually play. He nodded once, a jerk of the chin that felt like surrender or agreement or both. Okay. Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, I echoed, as if it were the name of a court date. In the days leading up to it, Serena acted like nothing had happened. She texted Grayson about the menu. She texted me a photo of linen napkins arranged like roses. Thought you'd appreciate, she wrote. I sent back a thumbs up because I was more dangerous when I was quiet. At the grocery store, the woman with the weaponized bob asked if I had a recipe for stuffing I liked. Serena's is so classic, she said. But we thought you might bring something modern. I'm bringing candied carrots, I said. Oh, she said. As if I'd announced I was bringing a stapler. I added carrots to the cart anyway. On Wednesday, I bought a simple navy dress, clean lines, pockets big enough for a phone and a pen. I ironed it in the afternoon light while the house settled around me. The deadbolt clicked satisfyingly when I turned it. I set the black folder in my tote and put the tote by the door. Then I took it out and moved it to the chair where I could see it. Some objects only reassure you if they're visible. That night, Grayson stood in the doorway of the bedroom watching me brush my hair, like we were both in an old movie where people know they're in an old movie. You sure? He asked. No, I said. But I'm steady. He smiled then, small and tired. I don't deserve you. No one deserves anyone, I said. We choose. Or we don't. He turned off the overhead light and left the lamp on. We lay awake longer than usual, listening to the wind tap at the window in tentative little fingers. I thought about all the rooms I'd designed, the way people believe walls keep things out when so often walls just echo what's already inside. Thanksgiving morning I woke early. The air had that holiday hush, a quiet that isn't silence so much as expectation. I candied the carrots because I'd said I would, and because following through matters most when you don't feel like it. I tucked the dish into the cooler bag like a peace offering and slid the folder into my tote like a boundary. On the way to Serena's, Ashford Bay looked like a postcard. Flags still, porches swept, the ocean ironed flat by the cold. Grayson drove. We didn't speak for 3 blocks. Then I reached over and put my hand on his thigh. He covered it with his, warm and heavy. At Serena's door, someone had hung a wreath made of dried orange slices and cinnamon sticks. It smelled like memory. She opened the door before Grayson could knock twice. "Happy Thanksgiving," she said, bright as crystal. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said, matching her tone atom for atom. Come in, she said, stepping back. "Everyone's here." Everyone was. Neighbors, cousins, the pastor. Laughter from the dining room. A high-ceilinged sound that rose to the beams. The table was set like a magazine spread. Every plate reflecting every candle. And every candle reflecting Serena. I slid my tote onto the chair beside my place setting. The folder made the soft, flat sound of paper with a purpose. Serena clapped her hands for attention. "Before we eat," she said, "I'd like to say how grateful I am for family. For tradition. For the people who hold us up when life is." She paused, looked straight at me, smiled sweetly. Demanding. I watched her the way you watch a magician's hands. The trick is never where they tell you to look. She raised her glass. "To Grayson," she said, voice warm enough to toast bread. "Who always takes care of what needs taking care of." Glasses lifted. A chorus of "To Grayson." He shifted in his chair. His eyes went to me. I stood. "Before we drink to that," I said, and my voice didn't shake, "I'd like to add something. Numbers. They're short." Every head turned, curiosity dressed as courtesy. Serena's smile lifted 1 millimeter more. "Of course, dear," she said. "We love specifics." "So do I," said and reached for the folder. The folder felt heavier than paper when I set it on the linen tablecloth. Candles flickered, catching the glossy black cover. Around me, forks paused midair. The smell of roasted turkey and rosemary seemed to thicken. "I brought something," I said. "It's short. And it's ours." Grayson's hand twitched near his wineglass. Serena's gaze darted to the folder, then back to me with the kind of smile that had teeth. "Well, dear," she said lightly, "I didn't know we were adding speeches. But by all means." I flipped the folder open. The pages inside were clipped neatly, months of statements, charts, numbers in black and red. I lifted the first sheet so everyone could see. "This," I began, "is the record of our household expenses over the past year." A ripple of discomfort moved around the table. The pastor shifted in his chair. A cousin cleared her throat. "I know money isn't a typical holiday topic," I said, keeping my voice even. "But since we're toasting to contributions, it seems fair to be specific." I slid the sheet toward the center. "These red lines," I said, "are payments made from my account: mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance. Gray lines are Grayson's contributions. If you follow the columns, you'll notice a pattern." Someone near the end leaned in to look. Serena didn't. "And here," I continued, turning to the second page, "are the monthly transfers from Grayson to Serena Lorne Consulting. Substantial amounts. Every month." A murmur. Serena's jaw tightened just enough to see. "She tells people," I went on, "that Grayson is carrying the household while I find my footing. That I live off his generosity. That's not just untrue, it's the opposite of the truth. And she knows it." "Victoria," Serena cut in, her voice edged with warning. "This isn't." "It is," I said, meeting her eyes. "Exactly the place. Because you've told this story to half this table. You've made my name small in my own home. And you've done it while taking money from your son every month without mentioning it to me." Gasps now soft but sharp. "Vic," Grayson started. "No," I said, not looking at him. "Not this time." I turned a page, revealing the chart, bars of red towering over bars of gray. "I don't need applause. I don't even need credit. But I won't have lies told in my place." Serena's smile was gone. Her knuckles whitened around her napkin. "If you think humiliating me in front of my family will." "I'm not humiliating you," I said, calm as stone. "I'm correcting the record." A long pause. The ticking of the old wall clock in the hallway was suddenly loud. Finally, the pastor cleared his throat. Truth's a kind of grace, he said gently. Uncomfortable grace sometimes. A cousin murmured, well, I didn't know. Trailing off when Serena's eyes snapped toward her. Grayson looked between us, caught in the pull of two tides. Mom, he said slowly, Vic's right. This isn't fair to her. Serena's face turned toward him in disbelief, as if his siding with me was the actual betrayal. You're taking her side over your own mother? I'm taking the side of the truth, he said. It landed heavy. Serena leaned back, napkin in her lap now like a surrendered flag. But her voice sharpened. You could have spoken to me privately. I did. I reminded her. Many times. This isn't a surprise conversation. It's a public correction to a public story. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ruth, yes, Cafe Ruth, spoke from halfway down the table. I've heard some of those stories, she admitted. Guess they weren't quite accurate. They weren't accurate at all, I said. My hands didn't shake as I closed the folder. I won't stop you from telling stories. Just make sure they're true. The room's air felt different, denser, harder to breathe. Serena's lips pressed into a thin, pale line. She looked at me with something colder than anger. Calculation. Fine, she said finally. If you're so desperate for recognition, consider yourself recognized. I didn't respond. Some statements are meant to be left in the air to sour on their own. Grayson cleared his throat. Can we eat now? The pastor chuckled awkwardly. Yes, let's. The conversation limped back to life, but the undercurrent had shifted. Guests avoided Serena's eye when they spoke to me. A cousin asked about my latest design project. Another complimented the carrots I'd brought. Little things, but enough to feel the fracture line. Through it all, Serena remained composed, passing dishes, refilling glasses, smiling just enough to keep the surface smooth. But every so often, her gaze flicked to me, assessing. Not beaten, planning. When dessert was served, she leaned toward me just enough that only I could hear. This isn't over. I looked at her, steady. I wouldn't expect it to be. It was the first week of December when I decided we couldn't keep circling the same silence. Snow had settled in the gutters, and the sky hung low, heavy with more to come. The house was warm, but the warmth felt borrowed, as if it could vanish the second someone opened a door. Grayson was in the living room, working on his laptop. The Christmas tree we'd bought last weekend stood in the corner, half decorated. I'd stopped midway, unable to decide whether I wanted to finish it at all. Gray, I said, standing in the doorway. He looked up, eyebrows lifting slightly. Yeah, we need to talk. He closed the laptop slowly, as if buying himself seconds. Okay. I sat across from him, leaning forward. This isn't working. Not the marriage, not the ceasefire. We're pretending everything's fine and it's not. He exhaled. I know. Then here it is, plain. I need to know whose side you're on. His expression tightened. It's not about sides. It is. My voice was sharper than I intended. It's exactly about sides. Your mother has been undermining me for months. She's told lies, spread rumors, tried to paint me as someone who's taking advantage of you. And you've stood by. I haven't stood by, he said. I've tried to keep the peace. Peace for who? I asked. Because it sure as hell hasn't been peaceful for me. He leaned back, rubbing his jaw. You're asking me to cut off my mother. I'm asking you to stand up for your wife. She's my mother, Vic. And I'm your wife. I swallowed. If the roles were reversed, if it were my family treating you this way, I would have shut it down on day one. No hesitation. He didn't respond immediately. The ticking clock filled the space. She raised me, he said finally. She's difficult, but she's been there my whole life. And I've been here every day since we got married. I've paid for this house, this life, supported you when you wanted to change careers. That counts for something, too. It does, he said quickly. It counts for a lot. Then show it, I said. Tell her once and for all that this stops. No more lies, no more notes, no more games. And if I don't, he asked quietly. The question was like ice water. Then I'll have my answer. He ran a hand through his hair, looking at me as if the right words were somewhere just out of reach. She's not going to change, Vic. I know, I said. That's why this is your decision, not hers. We sat in silence, the tree lights blinking faintly between us. 2 nights later, he came home late again. His face told me before his words did. I talked to her, he said, setting down his coat. And she thinks you're overreacting. I laughed once, without humor. Of course she does. She says she's willing to tone it down. For me. For you. I repeated. Not for me. She didn't apologize, he admitted. I nodded slowly. And you're okay with that? It's better than nothing. No, I said, standing. It's exactly nothing. That weekend I packed a bag. Not everything, just enough. Clothes, laptop, a few books. Grayson watched from the doorway. This is really what you want, he asked. No, I said honestly. It's what I need. He stepped closer. I don't want to lose you. Then you should have chosen me, I said. My voice didn't break, even though my chest ached. Vic, I can't keep fighting for space in my own marriage, Gray. I'm tired. And if you're not willing to protect what we have, then I have to protect myself. He didn't try to stop me when I walked past him. Outside, the air was sharp and cold, the kind that made your breath visible. I loaded the bag into my car and sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the house we'd made together. Through the window, I saw him standing there, a shadow against the warm light. Then I started the engine. I checked into a small hotel on the edge of Portland the night I left. The clerk didn't ask questions. He slid the key card across the counter and told me the best place to get clam chowder after 10 p.m. It felt like permission to be an ordinary person again, someone with no story attached to her name. In the room, I didn't turn on the TV. I stood by the window and watched the harbor lights freckle the black water. The radiator clicked. A tugboat pushed a line of barges toward the mouth of the bay like a parent guiding reluctant children. I set my bag on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for the sob that didn't come. When it finally did, it wasn't loud. It was a small sound, like a seam giving way. In the morning, I made 2 cups of coffee out of habit, then laughed and poured one down the sink. Habit, I realized, is the ghost of a decision you made once and never bothered to revisit. I decided I would revisit everything. I found a short-term rental within a week, a 3rd-floor walk-up with exposed brick, a stubborn bathroom window, and a view of a bakery that started its ovens at 4 in the morning. The smell of butter crept up the stairwell like a neighbor. I took it as a sign that life didn't mind being sweet around me again. I worked, not to escape, but to remember who I was when no one else was narrating me. Clients liked that I listened more than I talked. I started taking on projects I'd been too busy, or too careful, to accept before. A pediatrician's office that wanted to feel less clinical without losing its clean lines. A couple who'd been together 30 years and couldn't agree on a sofa, but wanted to die in the same room someday. A small nonprofit that needed their storefront to say, "We're here and we're good at what we do," without spending money they didn't have. I learned the city in steps. Where the early light falls flattest, which intersections steal more time than they give. The cafe where the barista remembers your name even when you forget to remember yourself. I bought a second-hand bike with a bell that sounded like a polite question. I rang it anyway. In the evenings, I let silence be silence. No door opening at odd hours. No keys dropped into the bowl like punctuation to a day I hadn't lived. I cooked for one and left the second plate in the cabinet without feeling guilty about ceramic loneliness. I rearranged my living room twice in the first month, not because it needed it, but because I could. News of Ashford Bay reached me the way rain reaches a windowsill. Soft, persistent, impossible to keep entirely out. A mutual friend texted once to ask if I was doing okay and had I heard. Heard what? That Serena had stopped attending the church committee meetings? That she'd started attending again 2 weeks later, as if she'd never stopped? That Grayson had asked for fewer hours for a while, and then asked for more? That he'd been seen running early in the mornings, moving through the fog like someone trying to outrun a sentence? I didn't ask for details. I let the fog stay fog. One afternoon in February, a white envelope with my name and Serena's neat hand showed up in my mailbox. I stood at my kitchen counter with a knife poised over the flap, then put the knife down. I brewed tea. I washed the mug I had just used. I opened the envelope with my fingers. Victoria, it read. You've made your choices clear. I trust you understand that choices have consequences, not just for you but for others. Grayson is adjusting. He was always sensitive. Perhaps you didn't realize it. I wish things had been different. I wish you had been different. S. I folded the note back into the envelope and slid it between the pages of a design catalog I planned to recycle. Not out of sentiment, out of accurate filing. It belonged with things I wasn't going to keep. Spring arrived late and all at once. A green rush up the sides of buildings and through the cracks in sidewalks. I moved into a larger space, still rented, still mine. I chose a deep blue for the bedroom walls, a color like the moment before the ocean decides to be a storm. I didn't ask anyone if it was too much. It was exactly enough. Work was good. Better than good. A regional magazine did a small feature on designers who understand light And suddenly I had more inquiries than my calendar could comfortably hold. I said yes to the ones that made something in my chest expand and no to the ones that felt like arguments waiting to happen. I learned that boundaries weren't lines you drew once. They were paths you walked daily, the gravel familiar underfoot. Sometimes I thought of Grayson in the soft way you think of a street you used to live on. What was good remains good in memory even if you'll never go back. I missed the version of us who believed we were on the same team. I missed the future we were almost brave enough to build. But the grief wasn't a fire anymore. It was a lake. Cold, wide, and navigable if you respected it. I didn't see Serena. Not in Portland, not in my inbox. I thought maybe the story had decided to end itself. Stories rarely do. It was a Saturday in May when I saw her again, outside a bookstore that smelled like dust and hope. She was by the window display, looking at a stack of memoirs with titles that promised to teach you how to be your own witness. For a second, I thought about turning around. Then she saw me, and turning around would have become a statement of its own. "Victoria," she said. Her tone was the same as it had always been. As if my name were a test she was sure I would fail. "Portland suits you." "So it seems," I said. She took me in, cataloging details. The bag over my shoulder, the paint fleck on the cuff of my shirt I hadn't noticed, the way I didn't fidget. Her smile was careful. "I've been meaning to reach out," she said. "You did," I said. "In February." That was an emotional time. "For whom?" She ignored that. "How is work?" "Full," I said. She nodded as if this confirmed a suspicion. "You've always preferred to be busy. Keeps one from thinking too much." "Sometimes it helps one think clearly," I said. We stood with the quiet moving around us like shoppers. She glanced at the door, then back to me. "Grayson misses you." I let the words be what they were, an offering, an accusation, a question. "That's his choice to sit with," I said. "You're very sure of yourself," she said, and the sentence only barely pretended not to mean something else. "I'm sure of my life," I said. "It's different." Her eyes narrowed, not angrily, curiously, as if I were a piece of furniture placed in an unexpected corner. "Do you ever regret the spectacle? The truth?" I asked. "No. I meant your presentation of it. You taught me the power of presentation," I said. I decided to stop being a prop. She flinched then. The smallest motion, a blink, a breath out of order. For a heartbeat, I saw a person and not a role. Then the role returned. "Well," she said, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her sleeve, "I hope you find what you think you need." "I have," I said. "And I'll keep finding it." She looked past me then, at a couple laughing on the corner, as if laughter were a language only they shared. "You always did like to have the last word," she said. "I like to have the true word," I said. "Last is just where truth tends to end up." We could have said more. There are always more words. Instead, she nodded once, a gesture with the weight of a closed book. She turned and I watched her walk away down the block, her posture as straight as ever, her shadow briefly touching mine and then moving on. That night, I poured a glass of wine and opened the windows. The city moved through the screens, sirens far away, a bicycle bell close up, someone practicing piano badly in the building next door. I sat on the floor with a stack of fabric swatches, and let my hands choose what my thoughts were too polite to articulate. A slate gray that felt like quiet. A mustard that insisted on being joyful. A linen that forgave wrinkles. I wasn't decorating. I was declaring. Later, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I stared at it until voicemail claimed it. After a minute, the message arrived. Grayson's voice filled the room as if it had been waiting just outside the door this whole time. "Hey," he said. A pause. People underestimate the eloquence of a pause. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything I didn't say when it mattered. For letting you stand alone. I'm learning. It's late. I know. I hope you're happy. You deserve that." I listened twice. The second time, the apology curled itself into the right place inside me. A letter delivered to an address that had moved but left forwarding information. I didn't call back. Not out of anger. Out of accuracy. Some doors close because they should. Summer happened like a held breath let go. I took a weekend trip alone up the coast. The The kind of trip that doesn't impress anyone on social media because it was made out of small things. A motel with a wooden ice bucket. A diner that put fresh blueberries on pancakes without being asked. A beach that required your full attention to avoid being knocked down by a wave that didn't care who you were. I let the ocean educate me. It has endless lesson plans. On the last night, I wrote myself a letter. Dear V, it began because formalities matter even with yourself. You left a life that kept shrinking you to fit someone else's narrative. You built a space, literal and otherwise, where your voice doesn't need permission. Keep it. Protect it. Share it only with people who know the difference between help and control. When doubt taps on the window, let it learn how strong the glass is. I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of my sketchbook. The next morning, I drove home with the windows down and my hair doing whatever it wanted. Months later, I took on a project back in Ashford Bay. Not Serena's Circle, someone new. A teacher who'd inherited her grandmother's cottage and wanted to make it breathe again. I went. I parked 2 streets over from the house Grayson and I had shared, not out of avoidance but because there's no right angle at which to look at certain places and not feel the echo. I didn't walk past it. I didn't need to. The cottage was small and stubborn and perfect. We stripped wallpaper that had forgotten its flowers. We found hardwood under laminate. We chose a kitchen tile the color of sea glass. When we finished, the teacher cried and then laughed at herself for crying. It feels like her, she said. But also like me. That's the trick, I said. Make room for both. Just not more room for someone else than for yourself. She nodded like I'd said something important. Maybe I had. Maybe I was just practicing for my own conversations with the mirror. On the way out of town, I saw Ruth in the cafe window wiping down a table, and for a second our eyes met. She lifted her chin, a quiet greeting. I lifted my hand. We didn't need to wave like friends. Recognition was its own kindness. Back in Portland that evening, I stood at my window with the city moving around me and said thank you out loud. Not to anyone in particular. To the compasses that had pointed me here. To the days that hadn't killed me when they had the chance. To the person I had been when I said yes to Grayson. And to the person I was now for saying no to staying. People ask if I believe in happy endings. I don't know if endings are ever happy. They're endings. What I believe in is true middles. Places you live in honestly, rooms you design with the doors you need and the locks you are not afraid to use. If you want a line, here's mine. I'm not the woman who left. I'm the woman who arrived. And the shadows? They're still there, long and sometimes clever, stretching themselves across thresholds like they own the place. I let them. Then I turn on the light I chose in the room I made, and watch them move back to where they belong.